Vidhammer Fantasy.
Welcome back to Vidhammer. In this video, I'm going over a first round matchup between the Orcs and Goblins and the Bretonnians from the April tournament at Darkside Comics in Sarasota, Florida. This is a 2,500 point engagement between Bob and Colin, where you get bonus points for killing off whoever has the most expensive magic item of your opponent's faction, as well as destroying the most expensive core unit. There are also up to 5 possible objective points for controlling terrain features. Bob's Orc army is led by Gorbad Ironclaw, who rides with a unit of 14 boar Biggins with a war banner. Then there's 3 units of 24 Orc Biggins, 1 with spears and the gleaming pennant, 1 with shields and a scarecrow banner, then 1 with 2 hand weapons and the banner of eternal flame. He also has a level 4 Great Shaman with the biting blade, opal amulet, and a dispel scroll. For the rest, he has 24 Black Orcs with the standard of discipline, 5 Wolf Riders, a Goblin Chariot, a Mangler Squig, and 2 Doom Divers. On Colin's side, there's a Lord on a Warhorse with the Sword of the Quest, the Dragon Helm, and the Virtue of the Ideal, which gives +2 weapon skill, +1 initiative, and +1 attack, but friendly units within 6 inches suffer -1 leadership tests. For his other characters, he has a level 4 Prophetess with the Chalice of Maliflor that gives an extra dispel die on a roll of 2+, but on a 1 you suffer a wound. A level 2 Damsel with the prayer icon of Quinelius, giving them the blessing of the Lady. Then there's 2 Paladins on Warhorses, one that's the BSB with the biting blade, Dawnstone, and enchanted shield, and another with the Virtue of the Impetuous Knight. Then for his units, he has 9 Grail Knights, 9 Knights of the Realm, and 10 Knights Errant with the Errantry banner. Otherwise, there's 2 units of 14 Bowmen, 14 Men-at-Arms, 3 Pegasus Knights, and 2 Trebuchets. For spell generation, the Orc's Great Shaman gets Hand of Gork, Foot of Gork, Edbutt, and Brain Bursta, while on the Bretonnian side, a level 4 Damsel takes Harmonic Convergence, Comet of Cassandora, Ice Shard Blizzard, and Curse of the Midnight Wind, while the level 2 ends up with Wyson's Wild Form and Pan's Impenetrable Pelt. The Bretonnians win the roll for board edge and elect to set up on the right side of the board and start with the archers as the Orcs bring out 2 of the Orc Boar units. Then it's the Knights Errant, more Orc Boys, 2 Pegasus Knights with the interesting Ushabti proxy, then Wolf Riders, Men-at-Arms, Doom Divers, Trebuchets, more Orc Boys, and Knights of the Realm. Then Orc Boys with spears at the top, Grail Knights, and the Boar Boys. They do some Vanguard moves, and Colin forgoes the roll for first turn to get his blessing. Bob starts off the first turn making his animosity rolls. Then the Mangler Squig darts out to get in the way and generally make things difficult, as the other units mostly stay still, but the Black Orcs turn towards the Pegasus Knights. The first magic phase turns out 11 versus 7. The first 5 dice go for a Hand of Gork with Irresistible Force that he uses to put the Mangler Squig right in front of the Questing Knights. He loses 2 dice in the backlash, but not much else. He uses the remaining dice for Foot of Gork on the Grail Knights and gets Irresistible Force again. The foot comes down and hits 8, but only 2 make it through the armor and ward saves before the caster takes a wound in the backlash. In shooting, the first Doom Diver hits the Knights Errant for 3 wounds, while the second drifts off 10 inches and can't make it back into anything. Pegasus Knights move just below the Black Orcs. The Grail Knights move onto the edge of the pyramid, and the others stay back for the most part. But the Men-at-Arms know what their job is. Get out and get killed. Colin rolls Snake Eyes for the magic phase and uses both dice to try for Wyson's Wild Form, but doesn't make the casting cost. In shooting, the lower archers put a wound on the lower Wolf Riders, and the upper ones take out one of the Boar Boys. Colin pulls a Vidhammer patented move here and misfires with both of his trebuchets, but neither blow up, They just can't shoot for 2 turns. Bob passes his animosity checks again for the 2nd turn, and the Mangler Squig bounces through the men-at-arms and the Knights Errant, killing off 2 of the peasants and 3 of the knights. For normal moves, the Wolf Riders move up to redirect the Grail Knights, and the Chariot does the same for the Knights of the Realm. The Black Orcs have to make a test to march, but pass and move up on the top of the pyramid thingy. Magic is 9 versus 6, and Bob uses the first 4 to attempt Foot of Gork, but the spell fails. And the remaining 5 attempt something, but it gets dispelled with Colin's dice. In shooting, the first Doom Diver goes after the Grail Knights, but drifts off, while the second puts 1 wound on the Knights of the Realm, but they save it. Colin has the Grail Knights charge the Wolf Riders. The Pegasus Knights charge the first Doom Diver. The Men-at-Arms charge Bob's Central Orc Boys, and the Knights Errant charge the Orc Boys with the spears. Now in Magic, Colin rolls another Snake Eyes. He uses them both for Wysons on the Knights of the Realm, and gets enough for the spell to go off, but Bob shuts it down with a scroll. For shooting, the upper archers put a single wound on the Mangler Squig, while the lower ones hit the Chariot for 3 and kill it off. Over to combat, where the Men-at-Arms hit the Orc Boys for 9 wounds, who kill off 5 peasants in return, and put a wound on the Damsel as well. The Orcs lose the combat, but pass the break test on a 4. In the upper combat, the Paladin BSB and the Knights put 3 wounds on the Spearmen, who hit back for a wound on the Lord, and 6 on the BSB, but they save them all before the Lord does one of his own. The Spearmen lose the combat, but stay steadfast and pass the break test. For the bottom combat, the Grail Knights make quick work of the Wolf Riders and overrun 10 inches. Then for the final combat, the Pegasus Knights kill off the first Doom Diver and overrun 8 inches. Bob starts off the 3rd turn declaring his Wa. The lower Orc Boys charge the Knights' flank, and the Boar Riders charge into the Men-at-Arms. The other units close in with the Black Orcs moving just over the top of the pyramid. Magic ends up 5 versus 4, but the only spell Bob was going to cast was a direct damage, so he jumps into shooting, where the surviving Doom Diver takes out 2 of the upper archers. In combat, Gorbad makes his way and puts a wound on the Damsel, but she saves it. Then he puts 2 more into the unit, but they save those as well. His mount Gnarler, though, does manage to get one through the Damsel's save that finishes her off. The peasants take out 2 of the Orc Boys, before the Boys and Boar Riders take out 9 of the Men-at-Arms, who fail their break test and get cut down on a 4-inch flea roll. Both the Orc units overrun 7 inches, with the Boar Boys hitting into the flank of the Knights Errant. In the Grail Knight combat, the unit champions have a duel that doesn't make a huge difference, but the Orc Boys unit is able to kill off the Paladin, who is riding next to him. After the rank and file models get their attacks in, both units have only managed 2 or 3 wounds to the other. The Grail Knights end up losing the combat by a little, but they fail the break test. However, they do manage to get away and flee 8 inches, with the Orc Boys ending up an inch behind. In the upper combat, the Lord issues a challenge where the Spearman unit champion accepts and, I believe, gets killed. The Orc Boys only manage to kill the central unit champion and the Knights Errant, but the flanking Boar Boys kill off the last of the rank and file troops. The Knights lose the combat and fail the break test, killing off the BSB, and the fleeing Lord also gets caught in the pursuit. In the bottom half of the turn, Colin charges the Knights of the Realm into the pursuing Orc Boys, and the Grail Knights manage to rally as well. Then a late charge of the Pegasus Knights into the second Doom Diver. Magic this time is 8 versus 5. Colin uses 2 dice for Harmonic Convergence on the Knights of the Realm and gets Irresistible Force. He rolls an 8 for the miscast and saves the wound, but loses 4 dice. With his remaining 2 dice, he tries for Ishard Blizzard, but it gets dispelled with Bob's 5. The Trebuchets get to shoot again, and both fire at the Black Orcs on top of the pyramid, with the first drifting off and the second scoring 8 wounds. The upper archers shoot for the boar riders and manage some wounds, but they all get saved. The lower archers also fire into the black orcs and kill off a couple more. For combat, the Pegasus Knights go first and kill off the second Doom Diver and reform to face the battle. In the central combat, the Knights of the Realm cause 3 wounds and they manage to save off everything that comes at them. The Orc boys are steadfast, but end up just outside of Gorbad's 18-inch leadership range. He needs an 8 and fails the break test, but he does manage to escape the pursuing Knights. On the 4th turn, the Black Orcs charge the Knights of the Realm, who elect to flee on this one and run through the central Orc boys and end up behind the Boar boys, losing 3 to dangerous terrain in the process. Then the Mangler cuts back through the central Orc boys, killing 5. The fleeing Orc boy unit flees another 7 inches, and with the caster in that unit, there's no magic phase. There's no shooting left either, or ongoing combats, so we go over to the Bretonnians. The Grail Knights charge the central Orc boys, while the Knights of the Realm rally and turn towards the Boar Riders. Cullen decides to offer up the archers as the charge block / sacrifice for the Boar Riders. Magic is 8 versus 6, and Cullen uses the first 2 for harmonic convergence on the Grail Knights, then the next 2 for Ice Shard Blizzard on the fleeing Orc boys, hoping to make it harder for them to rally, but the spell fails, ending the phase. The lower archers fire into the Black Orcs for 1, then the first Trebuchet shoots for the Black Orcs as well for 5 more. The second tries for the Spear boys, but it drifts back onto his own unit for 2 wounds, but he saves them both. In combat, the Grail Knights are able to finish off the remaining central Orc boys and overrun a few inches. On the 5th turn, the Orc boys fail their animosity check and end up charging the Knights of the Realm, and the Black Orcs make the voluntary charge into the Grail Knights' flank, as well as the Boar boys charging into the upper archer unit. In compulsory moves, the Mangler Squig cuts through the central combat and ends up killing off the entire Black Orc unit, and it takes the Grail Knights down to their last model. Talk about issues, he's got 'em. Magic ends up 5 versus 4, and the Damsel ends up taking a wound from the Chalice. Bob uses all 5 of his dice for Foot of Gork on the 1 remaining Grail Knight, but Colin gets an irresistible Dispel. In combat, Gorbad takes out 4 of the archers, who put 2 wounds back on him, but he saves them both. The rest of the Boar boys and Gorbad's mount manage to kill off the rest of the archer unit, and they overrun into the central combat, which comes next. Gorbad slides back into combat and takes out 1 knight. The rest of the Boar boys get 1 more, followed by the flanking Orc boys, who manage to kill off the Prophetess. The Knights lose the combat and flee away from the Orc boys 11 inches, and manage to escape the pursuit, albeit a temporary solution. The Pegasus Knights charge into the flank of the Orc boys with spears. The Knights of the Realm, however, are less than 25%. They fail to rally and run off the board. There's no magic, and for shooting, the lower archers put another wound on the Mangler Squig, while the Trebuchets take out 2 of the Orc boys and 5 of the Boar riders. In combat, the Pegasus Knights get 3 wounds on the Spear boys and manage to save both of the retaliation hits before they take out 3 more with stumps. In the last turn, Bob has the Boar riders charge 1 of the Trebuchets for a few more points. Magic is 8 versus 5, and Bob uses 4 to go after the lone knight, but it fails to wound. The remaining 4 go for an attempt at Foot of Gork on the same guy, and even though Colin has 5 dice to dispel, without the bonus from the caster, he fails to dispel it. But the foot drifts off, and he's still safe. In combat, they don't bother rolling the dice for the first battle and just say that the Boar boys kill off the Trebuchet and overrun off the board. In the other combat, the 2 unit champions have an ultimate pillow fight, neither gets hurt. The other knights manage a single wound plus 2 more in stomps, while again saving all the incoming attacks. The Orc boys lose the combat, but they're still steadfast and pass the break test. They even try to reform amid defeat, but don't manage that roll. There's no real movement or magic in the bottom of 6, but the archers do try to take out the Mangler Squig, but they're not able to finish it off. Then for the final combat, the Pegasus Knights kill off a few more Orc boys who don't manage anything in return. They lose enough so that they're no longer steadfast, and they fail the break test, with the Pegasus Knights catching them in the pursuit. And that's the end of 6. The Orcs get the victory for this round, with the final point totals being 20-7 after terrain and scenario bonuses. Hope you liked this battle report. Be sure and check back for new videos each week. Do me a favor and subscribe, like the video if you want to see more, and check it out on Facebook and Twitter as well. As always, leave a comment if you have any tactics or matchups you'd like to see, and until next time from Vidhammer, keep fighting.